Okay, hello everyone and welcome to the first tactical analysis video of 2018. And as you can probably see, it's a little bit different to the previous ones. A little bit of a new format that I've been thinking about for quite a while to help me try and explain certain concepts. But that to one side, if you are new to the channel, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and without further ado, let's get going. So, this episode is going to be about Guardiola's Manchester City, as we can tell by the sky blue colour on screen, and it is the 4-3-3 formation that they've used for most of this season and throughout Guardiola's career, which he utilised at Barcelona and at times at Bayern Munich as well. Now, at the start of the season, Man City did use a 3-1-4-2 at times to try and play both Aguero and Jesus up front together, but here we are at Christmas on the 9th of December, and the 4-3-3 is a formation that Guardiola's looked to pursue at Man City. Now, this was one that was requested quite a lot last season, not just from an analysis perspective, but from obviously the Football Manager recreation, which we'll do once we understand tactically what's going on. And I kind of wanted to leave it until this season because I had a gut feeling that this season was going to be Man City's season. It was going to really be the season that Guardiola put his foot down on the Premier League and well, going into the Manchester derby on the 9th of December, looking at the Premier League table, I don't necessarily think I was wrong. So without further ado, let's get started. So before we can recreate the tactic in Football Manager, we need to ensure we understand the tactic and what is going on. Now, Guardiola is quite a versatile manager, the type of manager who has a blueprint and will tweak that blueprint going into every game depending on the strengths and weaknesses of the opposition, and we'll look at that in a little bit more detail later, and we'll actually take a look at how Guardiola conquered Conte using quite a simple tweak later on. But that to one side, let's take a look at this formation. So some people describe it as a 4-3-3 and some people describe it as a 4-5-1. The main reason for that is it's an incredibly versatile formation with regards to off the ball positioning and movement. It can quite easily off the ball look more like a 4-2-3-1 as well, and another aspect to it as well can be the movement of the fullbacks if they come inside and free these guys up, the movement of the wide players, whether they end up being kind of the players you rely on to get the ball wide and whip the ball into the box to these guys who would push forward, or whether they become really almost offensively third strikers and you then end up relying on the fullbacks or the wing backs to provide the width. So really it's a very versatile formation that can be tweaked very, very well depending on the opposition you're playing against, and that's obviously why it suits a versatile manager like Pep Guardiola. So, onto the defensive phase. The truth is, there isn't one really. The idea is, if the opposition don't have the ball, they can't score. Seems simple enough, right? You end up playing with an incredibly high line, which is why Pep kind of got rid of Joe Hart as soon as he came in and opted to find more of a sweeper keeper. Obviously, when Man City are going on the attack in their own half, this guy will probably be stood around here to try and clear up any through balls or long balls that the opposition will try to play going forward to take advantage of the sheer amount of space Man City's high line will leave behind them. But because of how technically gifted the Man City defenders are, whether that be Otamendi, John Stones or company, who probably from a technical point of view are just as good as most Premier League midfielders, along with Fernandinho, who also will provide cover in this defensive midfield / halfback role when they do stretch out and play this high line, it will still be incredibly difficult for players to really outpace them. Both Otamendi and Stones are very, very fast, considering the fact that they are centre-backs as well, which will make them tough to counter-attack against. And obviously the main reason why I mention the fact that they are technically quite strong players is because they will be expected with this high line, especially Otamendi, to move into midfield a lot, to try and ensure they're always a passing option in case the kind of midfielders and strikers don't have a pass going forwards or don't really feel like they want to risk a pass going forwards due to, for example, how the opposition play during that particular phase. The ball can always be passed back to a centre-back who can then lay it off to a midfielder or another player and keep the flow of the game really going. If you keep moving the ball around and the opposition can't get it, they can't score. And again, I understand that a lot of people kind of look at high lines and think, well, let's counter-attack it, let's hoof that ball forwards. And even though I've just explained to you why it is very difficult, up against these centre-backs in particular, because of their physical qualities, to still beat them, and the mixture of the sweeper-keeper. Gary Neville actually spoke about this misconception not long ago. Now, I'm not saying playing a direct counter-attacking way of play doesn't work against this type of approach, but Man City are that strong in general that you are going to struggle. Very much so how teams used to struggle to try and do it against Barcelona. Gary Neville said was that when United played Barcelona, they initially went into the game thinking for the first half that they can just sit deep, defend, and hope to counter-attack them and take advantage of the space. But the truth is that that didn't work for them. You have to have a systematic, specific and dynamic plan to win the ball back, and not let the Man City players, in this case, play their own game first. Then worry about how you're going to counter-attack them and score. Because if you're just going to sit back and let them pass the ball around constantly and hope they eventually make a mistake and you counter-attack from it, when you go about 15 minutes without even touching the ball as a player, by the time you do get the ball, you're not going to counter-attack very well because you've not had the ball for so long. You know, you're out of sync, you're going to struggle. B, the fact that when you do eventually win the ball back, because you're so deep, they'll be looking to pressure you straight away and you'll probably lose the ball straight away again. C, if you do hope to defend deep, sit narrow, and let them pass the ball around in your half, due to the sheer quality that Barcelona or Bayern or Guardiola's current Manchester City side have, there's only so much you can do defensively if you let them pass it around in your own half. They will create chances and they will score. And if you're just going to bet on wanting to counter-attack, you're betting on the fact that you're not going to concede. Yet you're letting them do what they want to do by retaining possession in your half. They're in the dangerous area they want to be. So if you get a counter-attack, happy days, but you might be 3-0 down by that point. And that was what Gary Neville was really trying to emphasise. So if you really want to stop one of these sides playing, in this case in Manchester City playing, the answer isn't to look to utilise the high defensive line they're playing and hit them on the counter-attack as a main way of going forwards. It's about how you're going to stop them doing what they want to do, which is pass it around in your own half. He also emphasised the fact that if you want to play just for the counter-attack, go ahead. You might not already be 3-0 down by the time you do get a counter-attack. But the number of counter-attacks you are going to get, because Guardiola's sides are so good at keeping the ball, are going to be so low that on a law of averages, the chances are going to be incredibly slim anyway, so you are going to score from the counter-attack that you get. It's not about, for example, Ranieri's Leicester. What's our defensive shape going to look like? How are we going to win the ball back from the opposition in order to counter-attack them and turn defence into attack? It's more about how are we going to make sure we don't have to defend because we're the ones with the ball all the time. In terms of defensive tweaks, probably the most common one that we see quite often is Guardiola looking to utilise inverted fullbacks, which is something we'll take a look at later on. And that then ends up freeing up the two playmakers in the middle of the park, cementing this kind of area. Yes, it does leave this area to exploit, but again, we will take a look at this later on and how Man City look to counteract that. So it's just really emphasising that even when defensive tweaks are made, it's with the foresight of how we're going to score more goals by getting these guys forward and basically into the right areas as well. Which really just tells you a lot about the mentality that Guardiola's sides have. Now, offensively, as discussed, a lot of tweaking goes on here. So in some games, you might want both Sané and Sterling to play quite wide, hug the touchline, where you might then utilise inverted fullbacks and then allow these guys to free up. Regardless of whether you opt to do that or not, the striker in general has to really be the type of striker who will look to come deep and take defenders with him, which then creates room for these guys to make runs into the box behind their fullbacks, for example. Or as this guy comes deep, it then means that these guys can make runs forwards, and it makes it very, very difficult for central defenders to pick them up, or as the attack is being built up and Aguero would drop deeper, when he does drop deeper to supplement the midfield and help create more of a passing triangle, for example, it's that late surge into the box, especially with his pace, that makes him very, very difficult to pick up as well, when the rest have actually merge forward as well, and the ball is played into the box. And obviously, if you end up playing with wing backs instead, depending on the opposition you're playing against, and these guys are playing a lot more narrow, then you've got quite a lot of ammunition to aim for in the box. However, the main reason why I don't want to spend too long talking about this is because, according to Thierry Henry, Pep Guardiola used to tell them, my job is to bring you, as in the players, into the final third. And we've already discussed how they look to play their football and how they look to get the ball towards the final third. Your job as players is to finish it off. And that's why you see quite a large variation of goals come out from Manchester City. You'll see crosses. You'll see De Bruyne smashing them in from 25 yards and so on. You'll see sometimes it's the fullbacks doing the crossing. Sometimes you'll see the fullbacks are making a late surge centrally into the box, depending on how Guardiola takes his blueprint into every game and makes certain tweaks and changes. And most of the changes that you will see will be either the fullbacks and their positioning on and off the ball and how he looks to utilise these kind of wider players. Sometimes they will become more like strikers. Sometimes you will see them playing out wider, looking to get the ball into the box more, and these guys look to make more surges into the box. And we'll take a look later on at how, for example, Guardiola beat Conte. But regardless of what they've individually been told to do and modify the way they play and whatnot, to basically try and take advantage of opposition weaknesses, the build-up towards getting that ball in the final third a lot of the time will remain the same. And then it's the execution within the final third that Guardiola leaves down to the players, really. And this kind of approach makes sense, really, when you have players who are as technically gifted as both David Silva and De Bruyne, who can find a pass out of nowhere. When you have pacey, direct players like Sané and Sterling, you know, on each wing or making runs in towards the box. It makes sense to give the players that freedom that they want in the final third to figure out a way to finish it off, because chances are when you have players as good as the players Guardiola had at Barcelona, had at Bayern Munich and has currently at Manchester City, once he's told them how to get the ball into the final third, they'll figure out a way to score. And it seems overly simplified, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, without a shadow of a doubt, the tweaks that are made going into each game are really with the aim of helping to solidify them defensively, with the aim of changing the blueprint to try and exploit opposition weaknesses as much as possible, and in return try and increase the number of times as a result that you can get that ball towards the final third, towards the players you want shooting on goal and creating chances. So next up, before we start taking a look at more of a detail with regards to player roles and the offensive phase and how they look to get that ball towards the final third that we spoke about a fair bit, we need to stop the misconception that Guardiola sides are only about retaining possession and short passing. And Jamie Redknapp spoke to De Bruyne about this, and when Redknapp mentioned it, De Bruyne sighed and said, our aim isn't to keep possession. And he said that Guardiola always gets angry when people talk to him about tiki-taka and possession football, because Guardiola ironically sees them as a direct attacking team with the aim of scoring goals, which is really quite the opposite of when you think about a short, patient tiki-taka possession-style way of play. De Bruyne explained that what he wants is meaningful possession, and what Guardiola means by that is he doesn't want the team to pass for the sake of passing, and all their passes need to have a purpose and reason towards getting that ball towards the final third where you can force through a goal-scoring opportunity. And this is where the misconception happens, where sometimes, or maybe more than your average side, rather than playing a direct ball forwards and giving the ball away, they'll play a backwards pass. And by many, they'll see that as possession football or tiki-taka or boring. But the real reason behind it would be to actually draw out the opposition and as a result create more space for yourself in the final third from which you can mount an attack, if that makes sense. So for example, let's say I'm a central midfielder here and number 8 in this case has the ball, and let's just say that there was another player blocking off the potential pass towards number 7. Now this guy obviously has the option to maybe try and play a direct ball forwards through the opposition defence, like so. And even though this lad is Kevin De Bruyne, chances are he'll somehow manage a way to pull off that pass. But just to really try and explain this point, If the ball is played back, what that will more than likely result in, depending on the pressing of the opposition, and again, this is something that you'll tweak based on how your opposition press and whatnot, you then end up seeing the defensive line of the opposition start to move forward as you move the ball backwards, right? So as they then end up moving forwards, even though you might say, oh, well, that's boring, you've played the ball back. The point is, by playing that backwards pass, the opposition more than likely are going to start pushing men forward and playing a slightly higher line now that the ball's gone backwards. But as a result, when you've got pacey players like these two who are looking for space in behind to maybe exploit, when you've got two playmakers who want a little bit more room to run into and whatnot, then passing backwards, ironically, with this kind of play can actually end up giving you more room on the pitch. And obviously, naturally, you might look at the possession stats and say, well, that's rubbish. They do blatantly play possession football. But the stats are that high simply because of the sheer amount of quality of players they have. And the fact that their defensive phase is, if we can't go forward, just keep the ball. That way we don't have to defend. Then naturally, your possession stats are going to be that high. Whilst other teams going forwards, when they find that they can't actually find that killer pass to unlock the defence, would probably play it more direct out into the wide areas and try and brute force an attack through. But the possibility that that will actually create a goal scoring opportunity would be a lot more slim. So the risk factor of giving the ball to the opposition, with which they can then go on to score, will be a lot more greater. So it's just really different styles and mentalities of thinking. Now, the Thierry Henry and De Bruyne videos will both be in the description for anyone wondering, because I know I've mentioned them a few times now, so definitely go and check them out once you've finished watching this video. Worst case scenario, you end up picking up a tip or two. But yeah, next up, we're going to discuss Thierry Henry. So now we can really start to talk about the roles in the final third and the types of movement we really come to expect. So the two key players in this kind of approach here are David Silva and De Bruyne. Now, a lot of people see them both as playmakers, which they are, but it's worth noting that Silva normally plays much more advanced than De Bruyne. Now, it's not unusual to actually see De Bruyne drop in to his own half and pick the ball up off the centre-backs at times and play more direct balls out wide or forward depending on the opposition. And for that reason, we need to be aware that his role will look different to someone like a Silva. But it's very similar to the Iniesta-Xavi partnership, and it's their job to basically figure out a way to play the ball into these areas where these three can wreak havoc. Going forwards, most of the time you are going to be up against four-man defences, and it will obviously be very, very important for your playmakers to also try and supplement the runs into the box when possible. And when you're these wide players, it's really important that they remain wide and look to try and take advantage of whatever space they can find and then make late surges into the box, which can be either obviously on the inside of the fullback or the outside of the fullback. And really, you've got to have a lot of faith in your playmakers that they will be able to find you in the space where you really want the ball. At times, these wide players may find themselves with the ball out wide, where they can then maybe drill a ball into the box or play it back and let the fullback cross the ball in, depending what they have in mind. The main reason why it's important that these two remain wide is because you'll constantly keep that opposition fullback busy. And then when these guys start pushing forwards, you might have inverted fullbacks that might join in on the action. I'm not too sure yet. It depends who you're playing against, really. You would overpower and outnumber the two centre-backs, and these guys can't really help out too much. And there's only so much tracking the central defensive midfielder or central midfielder players can do as you start getting people into the box, and these guys surge in too. And this is actually something Thierry Henry mentioned. He said that he was playing for Barcelona. He was out on the left-hand side, I think it was, and he kept drifting central. And Guardiola was getting really frustrated on the touchline, and he couldn't understand why, because he scored a goal from the central area as well. Come half-time, Guardiola subs him off, and Thierry Henry was confused. I've scored a goal, why have you subbed me off? And the main reason why Guardiola subbed him off was because Henry was deviating too much from the plan. And obviously Guardiola's plan was he always wants this wide man to be keeping the fullback busy, to be looking for space out wide. So the logic behind this was that when Iniesta or Xavi, as the two playmakers, would get the ball, they'd need runners into the box or the final third to play the ball forward into. Now, with a lot of tactical approaches or teams, you'd see these players, when the ball's in midfield, actually come closer to the playmakers and kind of play 1-2s or give them passing options. But instead, Guardiola used to prefer these guys to investigate the space out wide and then make the late run in on the back of the fullback. And it's so important that these guys have faith and trust in the playmakers to get that ball worked into the box and into the right area. And when they stay out wide and look to utilise their pace up against the opposition fullback and get in behind them or in front of them, it means they're much more of an attacking threat than if they come centrally to where the bigger players are and then end up vacating the wide areas. So for example, this guy's no use to number 7 if he's stood right next to him. I mean, he can pass to him and he can make a run, but this guy will more than likely close him off. This guy will more likely close him off versus the ball being played into that area and this guy completely saying see you later to the fullback and being in on goal. So the width of these guys will vary depending on the opposition. However, it's incredibly important that both wide players can not just supplement the midfield as an extra passing option to help them retain possession, but it's so important as well that they get into the box almost like secondary strikers or make runs in behind for playmakers using their pace as much as possible. And that's why both Sane and Sterling are incredibly pacey players as well. It's not just so that they can beat their fullback, be wingers and whip the ball into the box. There's so much more versatility, unpredictability and pace around their type of play, which makes them as well very difficult to defend against, especially when you're aiming to get in behind that fullback and along with the striker create 3 in on goal, essentially passing options for the playmakers. Having 2 pacey players here on the wings as well means that you're always going to be a threat on the counter-attack. And Man City this season have been unbelievable on the counter-attack. You know, switching defence to attack real fast, direct balls coming forwards from De Bruyne and De Silva. Yep, that's right, direct balls. If you don't believe me, go watch Man City. Getting the ball out to these pacey players and getting the ball into the box and scoring that way. And it really does kind of destroy that whole short passing possession aura that comes with Guardiola. And the point is that yes, they look to hold on to the ball a lot. They'll play short passing, they'll play possession, but they won't hesitate to counter-attack if they get the opportunity to do so. And that's why these two are just so important to the versatility of the approach, which adds to the versatility of the formation that we discussed about earlier on as well, and what the formation offers. And even De Bruyne himself said in the interview link below that he thinks a lot of his passes towards the front 3, in his opinion, are quite direct passes. You know, it's not one touch, tiki-taka, to me, to you, Chuckle Brothers style of play, work the ball into the box. No, he'll attempt a lot of balls over the defence, through the defence, and rely on the pace of the front 3 to get in on the end of them. The striker as well is also a very important player who will aim to drop deep and drag central defenders with him, which in return makes more room for these guys to cut inside when required, but makes more room for the other playmaker to run into the box. And ironically, a good example of how the playmakers look to get into the box is maybe David Silva's goal against West Ham. They are still expected to supplement the central areas. And once the ball gets wide, due to his movement and due to the fact that he maybe at times comes short as like a deep lying forward or a false 9 or whatever you want to call it, which definitely was what Messi was at Barcelona, because this guy is so fast, because of his athleticism, when the ball's out wide and it needs to be played across goal, guess who's going to make a late surge into the box using his pace when a low-driven cross comes in? His pace means he'll probably lose his marker because he'll be faster than the defender. In this kind of scenario as well, you'll also have the opposite winger, Ramdeuter, inside forward, whatever you want to call it, also making his way into the box. And the chances are this guy will be lurking around as well, and you might end up with a fullback or two somewhere here or somewhere here, ready to recycle possession depending on whether you're playing wide or narrow fullbacks, but that's irrelevant for now. But that's another reason why defensively it is so difficult to defend against an Aguero or Gabriel Jesus type of player within this kind of system when they do come deep. So you gain the supplementing of the defence, but at the same time, ironically, running away from the box ends up making this guy more of a threat if the ball does get played out wide into them half spaces, which is where the playmakers are aiming to get the ball towards. And it's no surprise that they want to aim towards playing the ball into these areas towards these guys more, simply because it's probably going to end a lot better than playing the ball centrally towards 2 centre-backs, towards a small guy up front, towards where the goalkeeper can come out and really try and collect it, right? So hopefully that makes sense. But the TLDR really, it's important to really emphasise that contrary to popular belief, Guardiola's teams have always been really quite direct and simple in the final third, where the players are given a lot of freedom to do whatever the hell they think is really necessary. And the way that they set up with pace in these areas, with a technically gifted striker who drops deep and takes defenders with him, with two playmakers here who can find passes out of nowhere, and that still rigid, good technical setup kind of at the back, and then you have the fullbacks who will also supplement themselves however they want to, depending on opposition weakness. It's a very, very, very solid approach and very, very, very solid system, and it's no surprise why it has always done so well for him with these stronger sides who are capable of playing this way. Unfortunately for him, when you have players as good as his, you don't need to overcomplicate it. That's why his focus is, right, how can I prevent the team we're playing against from having as much of the ball as possible, and as a result try and maximise the amount of ball retention we ourselves can see, because it probably means we're, as a result of that, going to get the ball towards the final third a lot more, and as a result create more chances on goal and increase the percentage or probability that we are going to score a goal. So really it's quite simple. Okay, so one element that Kevin De Bruyne really emphasised during his interview was that all the players believe in Guardiola's way of play and believe in him as a manager and his philosophy. And you really need that as a manager for him to also believe in the tactical tweaks that you make. And like I said, Guardiola has a blueprint and he tweaks it slightly to become more efficient against different teams by trying to take advantage of their weaknesses. Now, a lot of people would look at this and think, well, clearly Conte wanted to keep the important Manchester City playmakers quiet. So, you've got Kante, who's very good defensively. Bakayoko is very good defensively as well, who can keep an eye on De Bruyne. Hazard just playing just off Morata, maybe can try and just apply pressure to Fernandinho to stop Man City being able to play out of the back. And looking at this as well, you might think, well, surely Guardiola, the right tactical approach will be to take advantage of the fact that they've got a 2 versus 1 situation on both flanks, so it makes sense to utilise wing-backs who are really going to stretch the Chelsea wing-backs and try and have Sane and Sterling, get balls into the box. And if you did think that as soon as you looked at this, that's great. But once the wing-backs, like this, have the ball in wide areas, and these guys make late surges forwards, up against 3 very, very big centre-backs. This guy will probably tuck in as well, and so will this guy, because he'll be trying to defend this guy. I guess the question is, who exactly do you cross the ball into? Do you kind of hope and pray that Aguero is going to beat Rudiger, Christensen or Cahill in the air? Do you pray that Sterling is going to win a header up against one of them 3 very, very big centre-backs? Now, it was actually Gabriel Jesus who was playing. Aguero, pretty decent in the air. Gabriel Jesus, maybe not as much. Do you hope that David Silva and his new bold head can get in on the end of a cross? Very, very difficult to play that type of game up against a Chelsea side. So now the question is, what was the tweak that Guardiola did, which clearly gave him superiority up against Conte in their 1-0 win against Chelsea? Well, I'll tell you what it was. Instead of going with the approach we discussed, knowing that really it wouldn't be ideal up against a team playing with 3 centre-backs, and Bakayoko is still pretty physical as well himself and a very big goalkeeper in the form of Courtois, he decides, right, I'm going to put Delph at left back, and tell him to drift inside. That way, he's really playing more as a central midfielder, which is an area that Delph is very comfortable in, right? And then he decides, well, okay, Walker, you float around. Sometimes you come inside and become an extra man in the middle of the park. And sometimes drift out wide if you want to. But generally speaking, he was quite conservative in his approach. And people might look at this and think, well, how's that a great idea? Chelsea are a counter-attacking team. Delph cutting inside has left a lot of room. Well, I guess Guardiola's answer to you would be, they've only got 1 in the wide areas. If I stretch the pitch as much as possible, which is what he did, and I tell Sterling and Sane to hug the touchline, that way the wing-back defensively for Chelsea always has to stay tight to him, always has a job to do defensively, then who exactly is going to utilise this space for Chelsea? And the answer is absolutely no one. And as a result of bringing these guys in more central, Morata's not going to do much closing down. Hazard isn't going to do that much closing down as a second striker. And before you know it, you've got this guy on this guy who will keep an eye on this guy. You've got this guy who will drift around in this areas here and keep Bakayoko busy. And before you know it, you've got De Bruyne floating around. Sometimes he'll go into the wide areas, sometimes he'll play make, he'll do what he wants to do. And that was really what gave Man City that numerical superiority in the middle of the park up against Conte. And that was achieved simply by tweaking the fullbacks and tweaking how wide these wide players were playing. And depending on the amount of tracking back or help Hazard was really doing, you can even argue that Man City, not just a one-man superiority in the midfield, but potentially a two-man superiority in the midfield as well. And because Chelsea were struggling so much to counter-attack, these guys were really quite irrelevant, even though it was a 2 versus 2, and there was always, obviously, on paper, the chance for Chelsea to counter-attack from. But because Man City was seeing so much of the goddamn ball, it was so difficult for Chelsea to play that counter-attacking game. They couldn't control the ball in the central areas. Man City always had at least one free man in midfield, which helped them retain possession. The wing-backs couldn't get forward on the counter-attack because they were always too worried about Sterling and Sane and what havoc they could possibly ensue. That those two very, very simple tweaks from Guardiola to his main blueprint essentially made a massive difference. So really, by overpowering Chelsea's central midfield, and with both Morata and Hazard not tracking back much, or really being able to help significantly in terms of winning the ball back, because they're just not capable of doing it like someone like Kante or Bakayoko, City had the central numerical advantage they wanted, and most of the time it would just mean that either De Bruyne or Silva would have space to move into and utilise that numerical advantage. And in De Bruyne's interview with Jamie Redknapp mentions the width that Man City have played so far this season and how it helps them, make the pitch bigger and it helps them retain possession. And De Bruyne said, well, we don't normally play as wide as we did against Chelsea, but the manager told us to do that to try and take advantage of the Chelsea wing-backs. And that's true. If you do take a look at Man City this season, you will notice that even at different points during games, their level of width changed quite significantly. Ironically, quite similar to what we do in our Football Manager saves that you can also find on the channel. But yeah, it just all goes back to talking about the blueprint, the tweaks, the positional play, and the versatility that the formation obviously offers. So going into the second half, Chelsea obviously realised they were struggling to win possession, central superiority, and they did eventually change formation, but unfortunately for them it still didn't work out too well for them. City adapted to it, and it was really the first time Chelsea had to do that so far this season, and Man City came out victors in an important title 6-pointer. So that is basically it in terms of the analysis. I've tried to go into as much as I can without making this video too long, and the rest is really up to you. And on that note, let's go straight into Football Manager and recreate this approach. Okay, so we are now in Football Manager, and as we can see on the right hand side, we do actually have both a home approach and an away approach, and we'll discuss both approaches when the time comes. Firstly though, what I want to say is that if you're expecting a Barcelona recreation, some kind of heavy possession based approach, kind of similar to what you used to get in FM12, where you'd be able to dominate with 75% possession regardless of how good or bad your team was and play one touch mad passing, it's very difficult to recreate that style of football in Football Manager 18. Football Manager 18 does put us under limitations as to what we can recreate and what we can do. But as always, my aim with these tactical recreations is to recreate the correct style of play so that in-game, with players in the right roles and positions, are mimicking what they do in real life. And that means that sometimes certain mentalities, certain settings, certain player instructions may not make sense, but they've been enabled to try and get the best or as similar as possible to what occurs in real life within the extremely limited match engine. So what I mean by that is, in real life, Man City are averaging about 71% possession which is a ridiculous number, and I think it's about 15% above second place. In Football Manager, the match engine doesn't allow you to have that significantly high percentage. Well, you can, but it would significantly sacrifice your goal scoring ability, right? Because Football Manager is limited. It's a match engine, it's a game. You can't expect every recreation to be a one-to-one recreation with real life. Also, another thing I want to clarify, if you're coming into this wanting some kind of one-touch whiz football, you know, you might see a few crossed goals when we take a look at some of the goals we've scored so far this season, and you might think, well, that's not how Guardiola plays, because you have some strange mindset that Guardiola only plays one-touch tiki-taka passing possession football style of thing. I beg you to open the description and click the link to Man City's website and take a look at Man City's first 30 goals this season and see how many of them goals have come from wide areas, how many of them have come from direct balls through the middle and out wide and crosses into the box. So if you see goals that aren't one-touch passes and whatnot because you have some strange mindset that Guardiola only plays that way, and that's exactly how Barcelona used to play, which isn't exactly how Barcelona used to play, but there just seems to be, in the Football Manager community, some strange mindset that if it's not one-touch passing, where players do no dribbling and no crossing, and things like that, it's not a Guardiola tactic. Please, please, please educate yourself on Guardiola. Okay, so firstly, the main differences between the home tactic and the away tactic. Well, it's a lot more difficult in Football Manager this year to play away from home, and it shows with performances and results as opposed to previous versions. So for that reason, it felt right to have an away version. Main differences: at home, your advanced playmaker is on attack. Away from home, he's on support. In terms of team instructions as well, these are our team instructions at home, and these are our team instructions away from home. And the main change I made was simply decreasing our defensive line. And I know we put a lot of emphasis, and in real life as well, Man City do still, particularly against the weaker sides, opt to play with a very high line away from home. But if you try to do that in Football Manager 18, you will get slaughtered away from home. It is a lot more difficult to play away from home nowadays. So for that reason, we have to cater for the match engine, and that's the tweak we've made away from home. Now, as always, as far as recreating these and testing these, I don't put that much effort into testing them. What I can tell you, though, is as things currently stand, on the 13th of January, we are quite comfortably top of the Premier League. And if you look at our results as well, we beat Arsenal 2-1, Napoli 2-0, beat Liverpool 4-1. We beat Man United not once, but 3 times. Yes, there were only 1-0 wins, but then again, well, Man City only beat Chelsea in real life 1-0, as we saw earlier on in the video, but it doesn't really mean much. It's more about the performance. Yes, we've had some dodgy results away from home: a 3-2 loss against West Ham, 1-1 draw against Bournemouth, a 2-1 loss to Everton, and a 5-1 loss against Napoli, and a bit of a poor draw against Newcastle. But all I'm going to say to you guys is, if you're watching this, you know, and you want to recreate Guardiola's approach in Football Manager, you probably have more time to put into trying to improve the away approach yourself, as opposed to what I did. So, as always with my tactical recreations, I do play games, I do choose the starting lineup, but then I just end up putting games on key highlights and whizzing through them. So I don't really manage my team properly. So it's inevitable that I'm not managing my team, I'm not managing training, I'm just holidaying between games, that towards the end you do start to get a few dodgy results, especially away from home, and you do start to pile up injuries and whatnot. Now, if you play properly and you adapt these two tactics, you might even find some tweaks for the away formula that you might find work better for you away from home. Great, the ball's in your court. I never bring my tactical recreations and say that they are the finished product, but what I do take pride in is the fact that what I do ship to you is still of a decent standard, and most importantly does what it says on the tin, which is give you the style of play which I've promised to give you. As far as our shape is concerned, as we can see, we've gone for the 4-3-3 we discussed. Danilo, a fullback on support on the left-hand side. Now, we discussed kind of utilising Delph against Chelsea's an inverted wing-back. And again, this is something you would do as a manager looking to exploit opposition. and Walker is a fullback on attack, simply because in general Walker does end up being a little bit more offensive than his opposite number. But again, as we discussed against Chelsea, he was quite conservative against them, so the fullback roles are really roles that you would look to change, as Guardiola does, depending on your opposition. Fernandinho, not a half-back, because he doesn't really always slide back and become kind of like a third centre-back like Busquets used to do. He still links up with the front two and sometimes, on occasion, gets forward and helps out. So him as an anchorman here is kind of a nice balance between the two, which is how he is in real life. Silva as an advanced playmaker, a bit of a no-brainer really. Always plays as the furthest forward of the three in the middle of the park, because De Bruyne does come deep a fair bit and look to pick the ball up off the back four on Fernandinho and just really look to help out. So that's what kind of made it a little bit difficult to choose Kevin De Bruyne's role. But I did end up going with a box-to-box midfielder simply because it seemed to be the natural right choice for the style of player who I want to, you know, utilise in the final third, but also come back and pick the ball up off the defence. Now, you can argue roaming playmaker may have been a decent option here, but I didn't find the roaming playmaker would drop deep enough. Deep line playmaker is also an option, but then I found that the deep line playmaker on support wasn't getting forward enough. You see what I mean? So it's a very, very difficult role to replicate in Football Manager. And I've ended up going with the box-to-box midfielder. And if you look at how good... Now, he has been injured for a while, but if you look at how good he's been so far this season, Kevin De Bruyne, as we can see, he's our second top goal scorer with 10 goals and 5 assists. So, yeah, De Bruyne, maybe not as many assists as in real life, because in Football Manager we've not scored as many goals as Man City have in real life, because it's very hard to replicate that level of dominance without putting loads of time into it. However, as a box-to-box midfielder, even though that's orange, it's meaningless. The guy's an absolute beast in this kind of role, and you'll get him doing what we want him to do. Next up, we have Aguero as a deep lying forward. Now, other options for this could probably be a complete forward, a trequartista, or a false nine. But it felt like the deep lying forward was what really grabbed us most of the goals and got him more involved with the midfield as well. As a false nine, he was dropping a little bit too deep, which meant that when we actually got the ball wide, he was a little bit too far away from the box to make a late surge in and get in on the end of crosses. So yeah, deep line forward on attack. As we can see, he is injured at the moment, and injuries towards the end of this season, of this save so far, has been a bit of an issue, but he's still got 15 goals to his name. And as we can see, Gabriel Jesus has scored 6. He's had nowhere near as many appearances as Aguero, to be honest, because I am a bit of an Aguero fanboy. Every time he scores, I pretend I'm Martin Tyler and scream Aguero at my screen, but he will still perform in that role, which is really what you want. And now, the wider players, and you're probably looking at this and thinking, Ramdeuters, Jesus Christ. The truth is, I found that the Ramdeuter is a very, very good role this year in FM18, much more improved than previous years. Now, as wingers, players seem far too one-dimensional, and it just seems very difficult to get them to cut inside and add a variation to their game. The exact same thing applied to them being inside forwards. It would seem like they'd always cut inside, and the number of crosses, unless you had fullbacks on attack overlapping, you weren't getting crossing from the wide men. And what I found with the Ramdeuters was that even though, on paper, Ramdeuter only has an attacking mentality and whatnot, the players do still track back naturally without you having to tell them to man mark. And they tend to position themselves automatically based on the opposition shape. And I know it means space investigator or something like that in German. And that is genuinely what they do. And to be fair, as we discussed in our analysis, that is what we want them to do. The only main thing that was worrying me was the fact that the Ramdeuter role says that the rest of the team have to pick them up defensively, but I've really not found the Ramdeuter to be a defensive issue, to be honest, and that's probably partly down to the fact that we are Manchester City and we are a very good team with a very good defence, so it doesn't really cause any problems. But it's not like they don't actually track back and help out, which is great. They look to find little pockets of space in the wide areas, and then they just do their own thing with their own kind of expressiveness and freedom, which is great. You'll get them cutting in sometimes, you'll get them sometimes taking their opposite fullback on and whipping the ball into the box and just generally being a nuisance, which is really exactly what we want from them, and most importantly, it just adds variation to their game and keeps them guessing, which is great. What's even nicer as well, at the moment we have Sane, who's left-footed on the left, and Sterling, who's right-footed on the right. So depending on who you're playing against and whether you want to be a little bit more direct going towards goal, you can always swap them over and have the right-footed guy on the left and the left-footed guy on the right, which means they will then become more likely to cut inside. Team instruction wise, both tactics begin on a standard mentality, and that is what I mean when I say I'm giving you guys a blueprint that has worked for me, but you guys can probably improve even more. And that is why both home and away were on a standard mentality, because whenever I start creating a tactic, I always start on a standard mentality, and there's no point in going to a more expert style of mentality until you really feel you have to. And to be fair, during this creation process, I've not really felt like I've really needed to. But, you know what, it may perform better with a slightly more attacking mentality at home. It may perform a little bit better with a counter mentality away from home. That could be what you need to solidify things up defensively without sacrificing possession and whatnot. It's up to you to try it out and let me know and see if you can improve this kind of blueprint of a recreation. So tempo normal. I like normal because you don't want them to be too slow, because the fact of the matter is Man City have been lethal in terms of counter-attacking with pace this season. It's not been the only way they play, and what normal gives you is it gives you a balanced tempo, increasing and decreasing when appropriate. So we have very intelligent players, very good players, and by choosing a normal tempo, you'll get a variation of both kind of tempos. Width-wise, we're going pretty wide, but really it's not that wide because we're only on a standard mentality. It's pretty balanced, and it kind of gives the players the opportunity to do what they like. And again, it's a lot easier when you're Manchester City. A higher defensive line, as we explained before, a much more closing down to apply a high pressure game. Opposition instruction wise, I've not actually used any opposition instructions throughout this entire save. A lot of people, when trying to recreate a high pressure game, like we did in FM17, creating gegenpressing, you go into opposition instructions and select always on closing down for opposition players. But then again, I've not tried it. So try it out and let me know whether you feel that improves, you know, your pressing game, and whether it helps you not concede as many goals and heck even score more goals, and it increases the closing down intensity. But so far I've found that simply setting it as a team instruction has been enough. Build up, we're looking to play out the defence, we're looking to pass it into space, which aids with the counter attack. We have some very, very fast players as well, and that is what you also want from the central players, playing it into Aguero or playing it into the Ramdeuters, who will look to cut inside. Again, all these instructions should be pretty obvious based on the analysis that we've had before jumping into Football Manager. Shorter passing, we're looking to retain possession as well, but even though we have shorter passing on as directness, it won't necessarily stop players playing direct balls forwards. You know what I mean? You've got very creative players who are being told to be a little bit more expressive, so you will get a nice variation between the two. You just won't get ridiculous hoofball forwards, which really sometimes the match engine can get away with, that you don't really want, and it helps us try and attain them high possession stats as well. Freedom of movement, the players have been told to stick to positions. As we discussed, Guardiola really believes that it's important that players all own the space they've been assigned for several reasons, as we explained earlier on. If you want more information on that, click the Thierry Henry link in the description below, where he talks about a time he got substituted off for not following Guardiola's instructions and moving out of his position. Final third, I know we said that Guardiola kind of leaves it over to the opposition players, but work ball into box just tries to emphasise that more Man City-esque style of play, and being told to play low crosses as well, because I find that when it comes to crossing the ball, sometimes Football Manager can be a little bit lackluster and stupid. When you've got Aguero or Jesus up front, you probably want to try and emphasise low crosses. And if you look at Manchester City in real life as well, again, link in the description to the first 30 goals they've scored this season, most of their crosses have been relatively low crosses. And even the ones that have still been aerial have been what you'd consider low crosses in Football Manager as well. Low crosses doesn't just limit you to kind of passes or drills across the ground, it mainly limits you to kind of shoulder height style of crosses as well, versus the other options, which are mixed crosses, which are floated crosses and whipped crosses. So low crosses is definitely the option you want to go for. and it mimics Man City as much as possible in real life. Team shape fluid, that way the attackers do help out defensively, and the defenders also help out offensively. There's a nice fluidity to the way the team pass the ball around, and that is basically it. If we take a look at the top of the Premier League, it's obviously not a full season, but it's safe to say that tactically we're not doing too bad. And like I said, if you actually put effort into your games and managing your team, unlike I did, you'd probably be doing even better. So unlike Man City in real life, we have actually lost some games, both away from home. We've won 16, drawn 4, lost 2, scored the most goals in the league, and conceded the second least goals in the league with the best goal difference. So now if we take a look at the team detailed statistics, we'll see that we do actually have the highest passing percentage. It's not quite as high as the Barcelona in prime, but like I said, we're Man City, we're not Barcelona, and our average possession is significantly lower than Man City in real life, but despite that, we do still have the highest average possession in the Premier League. Like I said, you are limited by the match engine, and this would probably be a lot higher as well if we could play with a very higher defensive line away from home and whatnot, but there's just so many different factors that the match engine limits you with that you don't have in real life. It's also worth mentioning, this is an interesting fact for people that don't know, possession in Football Manager is calculated very differently to how the Premier League calculate possession in real life. So yeah, but generally speaking, as you can see, we do have the most average possession in the Premier League, but you could probably achieve a higher possession playing with a controlled mentality, maybe slowing the tempo down even more. But what's the point if the match engine's not going to really let you score any goals, if you get where I'm coming from? So yeah, obviously some very nice results there, and yeah, let's take a look at some of the goals. Here's a really nice goal that we scored against Liverpool away at Anfield, and the build-up begins. We'll start to see kind of glimpses of that short, fluid passing, playing out the back style of play that we're really looking to utilise. So sweeper keeper, definitely an option for the two centre-backs as we look to build the attack. We can see Fernandinho just kind of being the link between the two playmakers and in front of the back four as well. You can see the positioning of the two Ramdeuters really quite nice. And if I can pause there, that's exactly what we're looking for. So the ball came to De Bruyne, who picked it up in midfield, and that's the exact type of direct ball they've been doing in real life. And that's what Sterling did. So he was just behind of the fullback from our side of things, and then made the run, utilising his pace in behind when De Bruyne spots that space and plays the ball into him. So Sterling picks the ball up one-on-one with the goalkeeper, is always going to score from there, and that's the exact style of play we're looking for. This is kind of like the seal, right in the 86th minute. Real nice build-up play. See Silva being utilised, Fernandinho as well as that anchorman in midfield. Otamendi being given the ball to play out of the back. Real nice, I wouldn't say one-touch football, but again, the direct ball forwards from the playmaker. Bernardo plays a low cross into Aguero, and just like that, just how they play them low crosses in real life, it was a really nice finish from Aguero. And what was even nicer was that late run that he made, if you noticed that, from deep on the edge of the box to utilise his pace to get in front of that defender and finish it one-on-one with the goalkeeper. Now, looking at the stats, 51% possession, you might think is not really great. Now, I'd say 5 clear-cut chances, on the other hand, is great. Like I said, it is very, very difficult to replicate what you get in real life, especially up against the really, really strong teams. Or if we want to be really picky about possession, we can look at a game like this where we had 70% possession. So it just goes to show it is possible, but you've got to be up against the right opposition who are playing the right style of football. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult in the match engine to basically pull it off consistently like Man City do in real life. Like I said, Man City's average possession, I think it was about 71%. Now, even though possession in real life is calculated a little bit differently, 71% possession on average is still amazing. And I would salute anyone who can recreate that this early on in the match engine without utilising match engine exploits and actually score a high number of goals, which is what we achieve. So this is a real nice goal. It's kind of the final goal that sealed West Brom's fate, and you can see how we built up from the back, but it also allows you to see how deep West Brom are playing, which is why we managed to get 70% possession, basically. But there you go. pass into space through the middle, and it was a real nice finish from Jesus up front. Once again, another example here. We're playing against Man City. We won 1-0. We got 78% passes completed, which I think is pretty impressive up against Manchester United away from home, but only 52% possession. But it's up to you whether you want to judge the possession in the game versus clear-cut chances, right? And it's about getting that right balance. But the winning goal, Kevin De Bruyne, really reminiscent of some of the long shots he's been scoring recently in real life. And it just goes to show how well he's been playing in this approach, and honestly, how similar his movements altogether and his goal scoring and his ability to get assists basically, and his movement off the ball, how close that's been to real life. So there's kind of the freedom that the players get into the final third. They won't be scared to attempt direct balls if that's what they want to do. De Bruyne eventually picks the ball up. Nice play here, making sure the fullbacks get involved. De Bruyne shoots, De Bruyne scores. And, you know, that's not the first long shot he's really scored in this tactical approach. You can see number 17 there, De Bruyne. He does attempt them a fair bit. He really does, because that's what he does in real life. He has the freedom to be able to do that. Now, truth is, I can't sit here and show you all the goals we scored, but I want to try and show you a bit of a variation of them. And this was the 5th goal we scored against Leicester. Now, first of all, if we pause, we can see we are at home. Look at how high our defensive line is. Now, it can be debatable whether you want Fernandinho to be a little deeper or not. That's completely up to you. You probably do that based on opposition. And to be fair, given that they've got Vardy up front, if I was actually managing this and tweaking it, I would have probably, well, obviously I was managing it, I just wasn't managing it, if that makes sense. I'd probably have him sit a little bit more deeper, maybe as a halfback, to try and deal with his pace. But as you can see, we're playing very high in Leicester's faces, up against their deep defence, and just look at how nicely, how patiently we pass the ball around. And really, the emphasis is that with this kind of tactical approach, look at how Mangala is stepping into midfield. Stones is essentially stepping into midfields. And the analysis, I described them both really is almost got the technical ability of regular defensive or central midfielders. And that's what we're getting from them within this build-up. Look at how far forward Walker has pushed up. We still have Danilo down here on support, which is the default setting, which ensures that he still kind of provides that balance. But the idea now is Toure, who here in this case, because De Bruyne's injured, is playing in the box-to-box midfielder role. If you look back at last season, look back at the goal De Bruyne scored against Man United, and that explains why Toure's position right here, there, is a pretty good shout for him. He's got Gabriel Jesus to his left-hand side, Sane just finding space on the left-hand side, along with Bernardo on the other side. Just look at how many players we got forward. This nice intricate passing. Sane is a Ramdeuter. He gets the ball. It's completely up to him what he wants to do. In this case, he opts to pass the ball in. Bernardo to Toure, playing it really patiently until the playmaker gets the ball and you've got that ball in the final third, and then it's completely up to them what they want to do. In this case, lovely through ball to Gabriel Jesus, and before you know it, Bob's your uncle. We score our 5th goal. And I believe that is going to be it for this video, guys. If you want to download the tactic, it is going to be in the description below. If you've come from the FM base thread, let me know in the comments. That'll be pretty damn cool. One more thing we probably want to look at, as we can see, Aguero 15 goals, De Bruyne 10, Sane 9, Jesus 6, Silva 5, Silva, the other Silva, 4, Gundogan, Sterling, Toure, Stones, Mangala, Fernandinho and company also joining in on the action. In terms of assists, Leroy Sané is topping it with 9. Sterling with 7. So you'll see that they'll naturally get a lot of goals and a lot of assists because they're going to cross the ball a lot and get in on the back post of a lot of crosses coming in their way as well. Sergio Aguero deep lying forward, dropping deep. He'll also almost act as a third playmaker at times. We've got Bernardo Silva, who hasn't had too much game time, still playing relatively well. De Bruyne could have a few more assists, but to be fair, he's been out for quite a while with an injury, and I'm more than happy with him being our second player in double figures goal-wise, considering he's a box-to-box midfielder. A lot of his goals are long shots from outside the box, and the way it's configured really gets the best out of him. Silva contributes as well. As you can see, really all across the board, you even get assists coming out from the likes of Walker, Danilo, who are players that really play as fullbacks. So you'll get a nice spread. If you want something as strong as how Manchester City are doing in real life, you know, and as dominant, I think it could be possible if you put a lot of time and effort, watch games specifically, and try and basically exploit opposition teams as much as you can. These results have been achieved using plug and play. I personally believe, based on all the goals I've seen from Manchester City this season, that I've managed to create something very, 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 very similar that is producing somewhat similar results. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.